anytime we experience any sort of uncertainty in our life, it has a way of surfacing our deepest insecurities and fears, and very few of us pray at the level of our insecurity and fears, and as a result, we don't really experience God during those times. A few years ago, Donna was going to go on a mission trip with a group from our church to the Dominican Republic. And as the trip got closer, I found myself getting more anxious. And there were some obvious reasons why I was getting anxious. One of them was, she's going to a foreign country, she's going without me, and there's just always just some uncertainty wrapped around that. But I was also getting anxious because she's done this before. And she did this before, and she left me when they had just turned 1. And it was amazing. The moment she left, all of a sudden, both of them had diarrhea all at the same time. And it lasted for about 2.5 days or so. And so I felt like I was nonstop changing diapers, and then they wouldn't listen, and then they wouldn't eat, and they wouldn't do all these things. If there was Facebook Marketplace back then, I would have been tempted to put them on there before she got home. That's how bad things were for me. Here's the thing. When I prayed the how and what, I prayed that, God, would you protect her when she's gone? I hope she's a great time caring for those in need, and, be with us during that time, and have her return home quickly. But when I began to ask, God, why is this really important to me? Here's what I came up with. I was afraid that if something happened to her, I wouldn't know what to do. And I began to think, well, I don't want to be single again because I don't want to spend the rest of my life alone. I mean, I was flashing back to like when we were dating, and my mom said, no one will ever marry you, all that stuff. And I remember saying to her, I was in the corporate world at the time, I remember saying to her, like, hey, honey, don't worry about it. I'm gonna do really well in the corporate world. I'll buy you a nice house and all that stuff. Well, then, we get married, I become a pastor, and it goes in reverse, so I can't fool her anymore, And who wants to marry a pastor? That's a really tough one, and all that stuff. And then I didn't want my kids to grow up without a mom. When we take the time to uncover our deepest fears and insecurities, here's what it'll reveal every single time. God, here's what I'm afraid of, and I don't trust you with what I'm afraid of. And God will say, now we are really praying. I think this is the biggest reason right here why God wants us to get very specific with our anxiety. You see, oftentimes when we feel anxious, we don't really know the root why we're anxious. Because that's the nature of anxiety. It's just kind of undefined. I mean, I didn't really know, Donna was going on this trip. I didn't really know what it was. But God is like, hey, listen, if you can name the anxiety, what's the real cause of it? Once you get into the middle of it, it'll benefit you because now you'll know the root that's driving it. It's one thing for you to say, hey, I'm anxious about work. It's another thing to peel back the layers and go, God, I'm really anxious about this project. Because if it doesn't go well, everybody will think that I'm a failure. Oh, God, I guess what I'm really anxious about is my image. God, will you give me a peace and remind me that my identity is in you, not what other people think about me. Or if I don't do well on that project, God, I'm not sure how I'm going to provide for the family. Oh, I guess, God, what I'm really anxious about is I don't trust that you will provide for me. God, would you just remind me that you are my provider? And so when we go from how to what to why, at one scenario, it's like we're just thinking about work. But then as we go to the why, what ends up happening is now we start to name the root of the anxiety. And when we can name the root of the anxiety, God in you and God in us will go to work, and he'll begin to rip that out, and we will become less anxious. And then our guy Paul, he wraps it up by telling us what the outcome is going to be if we do this. And he says this. He says, you do this, and then the peace of God. Now, what's the opposite of anxiety? Peace. And when we tend to think of peace, we think it's circumstantial. It's like, I had a peaceful day. It's a day of very minimal problems. And then it's like the next day we have all these problems and conflict, and we're like, oh, there goes my peace out the door already. But when Paul says the peace of God, they would have thought of this Hebrew idea of shalom. And shalom means wholeness. And it's this peace that can only come from God. And so he's saying we can experience the wholeness of God even when our circumstances aren't whole, and they may never be whole. And he says, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding. In other words, when this happens, you'll go, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, I should feel anxious. I mean, things are just falling apart right now, but I just have this deep sense that everything is going to be all right, even though not everything is going to be all right. Because God is sovereign, and He's in control. And guess what? I'm just carrying my weight, and I am not going to lay a hand on His weight. So let me ask you, what is it that you're anxious about? Because whatever you're anxious about, it's a signal. It's a signal that you are carrying a weight that you were never meant to carry. And it's a signal that you need to pray, but not just standard prayers, but you need to pray differently. You need to get to the why so you can understand the root that's driving your anxiety. Because if you don't, here's what's going to happen. You will continue to focus on the what ifs. And it'll be, well, what if this happens? And what if this doesn't happen? And then because of those scenarios that are constantly going through your mind, you're going to try to grab control of the things that you can't control, and you'll end up carrying a weight that you're not supposed to carry. And as a result, your anxiety will only escalate. But Paul says, instead of focusing on the what if, I want you to focus on the what is. And what is not your circumstances. What is? God is sovereign. He knows. He's in control. And because of that, would you stop trying to be in control, Paul says, and would you be willing to just set down the weight that you are not meant to carry anyways? And if you'd be willing to do that, and if you'd be willing to pray, but pray a different kind of way, that you really begin to solve the mystery behind what is driving your anxiety, you will experience something that only God can give you. And that is His perfect peace in the middle of an imperfect and uncertain world.